Hello friends, it's me, your old pal Dave Makes Noises. Just wanted to drop a quick reminder to please check out the official Mr. Ripper subreddit, r/Mr. Ripper. It has quickly become the hub where we gather our stories, as well as a gathering place for our beloved community. No shade to the Discord. Also, we live stream some storytelling every Sunday here on the channel, where Rip Daddy, Brian, and I kick back for a couple hours with all you sweetie pies out there and have a chuckle. And on Wednesday, we are now live streaming our D&D campaign every week. 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. Eastern, 10 p.m. GMT, Sundays and Wednesdays. Today's video was made possible by our dear and darling friends over at Campfire, but we're going to touch on that later, kiddos. Now then, D&D players, what is your most ridiculous or hilarious death? Part 1. So my players were on an airship in Storm. They had tied themselves to a railing on the ship so that if they went overboard, they could be pulled back up. A dragon attacked the ship, and a mage decided to hurl himself off the ship and use the momentum to swing around and propel himself towards the dragon. He had plenty of ranged spells and weapons, and I even had cannons on board the ship. I have no idea why he decided to tackle it head-on, thousands of feet in the air. He cut the rope mid-swing so that he could be swallowed by the dragon and attack it from the inside. This character was obsessed with fire, so the player claimed that being in the belly of a fire-breathing dragon would be like going to Valhalla. He did indeed get swallowed and ended up clinging to the wall of its fuel bladder. He threw a fireball down into the liquid below and blew up the dragon along with himself. Today's video has been made possible by Campfire. Campfire Pro is in-depth creative writing software teeming with tons of tantalizing top-tier tools to keep your tales, tactics, and TPKs together and organized. Its character pages will help you keep a tab on all of your characters with details and backstories. Timelines can help your universe brain manifest all those upcoming plot points and twists. You can even track character arcs and use the corkboard-style map view to create all the locations you need. Even with all of that power now in the grasp of your skilled, well-manicured hands, the stories that you write are completely private, and no one else can access them. If you are a dungeon master, you will absolutely want to check out the brand new World Building Pack. It's an expansion to Campfire Pro with even more tools to aid in the boundless architecture of your infinite omniverse. As any omniscient arbiter of worlds should, you can now construct new species, items, magic systems, and even develop your cultures with religions, philosophies, and languages with this hive mind of infinite creative potential that lies beyond the 10-day free trial, 10-day return policy. If you decide to buy, it is only a one-time purchase of $49.99, and the new world-building expansion is $24.99. Give those outdated documents and spreadsheets one last sweet kiss goodbye, because you've leveled up. Your game should reflect that. Campfire Pro puts the entire omniverse of your own design at your worthy fingertips. Check out the link in the description when your creative spirit is ready to spread its glistening, impressive, prismatic wings and fly free for the very first time. The worst DM I ever played with used critical fumble rules. For the uninitiated, critical fumbles are really bad random consequences for rolling a 1 on an attack. When you're a class that attacks multiple times on a turn, and in my case, dual wielding for even more than usual, that basically amounts to a 15% plus chance to screw up so monumentally that you can end up killing the whole team with your apparent incompetence. Real swordsmen didn't accidentally chop off their arms with every 10th swing. Anyway, that kind of consequence is exactly what happened to me. First, I somehow stabbed myself in the stomach, falling to the floor. I desperately swung again with disadvantage and got another 1. Doing that caused me to accidentally let go of my sword, and it impaled my wizard teammate for maximum critical damage, killing him. I died immediately after. Yeah, these are like severe critical fumbles. I don't know if I can get with like that level of consequence for a crappy roll, but if you just like get a little boo-boo, a little bee sting, it's like a little flick on the nose from the DM to be like, hey, roll better. That's all it should be. Like, don't go crazy with the DMs. Be nice. You want your players to come back, don't you? I played a game once which was just a one-shot session, where one of the regular campaign players took over as DM, and the regular DM was playing instead. The guy who normally DMs shows up super drunk, playing a gnome rogue character who pretends to be a wizard through sleight of hand. We reach a castle surrounded by a moat, and the drunk player requests that his character be thrown by the stronger martial party members at the castle wall and pretend to cast fly. We accept, and absolutely launch this tiny gnome at the castle wall, full force. The DM makes some rolls and tells the player his character is knocked unconscious on impact and falls to the base of the wall. The drunk player says, "Awesome!" decides to roleplay this immersively and lies on the floor, promptly falling asleep and snoring loudly throughout the rest of the session. We proceeded without him and declared his character to have been killed by his own shenanigans. We had a party in college that was about as stereotypical as it gets, including a Drow Rogue. The guy who played the Drow decided to be edgy and aloof throughout the entire campaign. He'd constantly go off on his own, but not just to scout ahead. He would specifically try to get at the treasure before everyone else, so he could pick what he wanted out of it. At first, the DM told him to stay with the group, but then he entertained these little side adventures more and more. The guy would sneak off to do stuff every single adventure, and often would end up with more gold and artifacts because he would discover the loot first. One night, like every other time, the DM made him go off and sit in another room by himself to do a side adventure during a crypt exploration. The rest of the group was trying to figure out what was written in an old book we had just discovered. The DM went into the other room for the guy's side adventure. About 3 minutes later, they both came back out. Drow guy sat there at the table with us for about 5 minutes while we were all still discussing the book. Cleric and wizard knowledge checks aplenty. We figured it out eventually. Drow guy quietly put his dice in his pocket and left. We didn't really notice or think much of it because he was always slinking off. It was kind of like his character. He'd sneak off to the kitchen to attack the snacks or off to the balcony to smoke a cigarette. We continued to explore the crypts. About 20 minutes later, we discovered the final room of the place. There in the center was an open sarcophagus with the body of the Drow Rogue laying face down. It looked like he was trying to crawl away from it. Some investigation shows that he had succumbed to the effects of a cursed object he stole from the sarcophagus. So yeah, the DM was sick of his shit and decided to kill his character. We were entering essentially a boss fight between my party and my character's nemesis. He was very powerful, so we couldn't afford to mess this up. On his first turn, my buddy decided to eat a magic jelly bean, whose properties he didn't know. He became unable to speak, and all of his spells and actions were verbal. Did I mention that he was a tiny little pixie whose defenses couldn't repel a fly? And he was also the cleric and healer for the entire party. He couldn't do a thing and died instantly, completely of his own doing. This is why we no longer allow magic jelly beans on the battlefield. It's quite an insane story, but the climax of the story involved my tabaxi rogue getting knocked out of an ent by a giant, getting knocked unconscious from the damage and fall, taking a hit from the giant when unconscious. Then a giant threw a fucking goblin with a spiked helmet blindly over a city wall. It hit me dead on, and well, I died from being impaled on a goblin's spiked helm after it got yote over a wall. NB. The goblin also died. I wasn't the DM, I was actually just doing homework in the same room. The party was fighting a dragon. They were getting beat up. Basically, this one guy was spectacularly failing the entire fight until finally the battle ends with him rolling a 20 and chops off the dragon's head. Everyone cheered. The dragon's head falls into this deep pool of water in the cavern. Everyone is low on health, but the battle is done. This guy was really annoyed with how the fight went, so he wanted to get a fang from the dragon as a token. So he jumps in the water. He rolls another 20 and swims to the bottom of the pool. Then, trying to get the fang out, he rolls a 1 again. DM says he gets the fang out, but accidentally stabs himself. Applies reduced bite damage, but it's enough to knock him unconscious. Underwater. F to pay respects. Sounds like something Clunk would do. Pathfinder in a mostly homebrew campaign, not D&D, but it still counts, I think. I had set a goal of making a pacifist tune that actively attempted to stop all combat encounters. I had verified with my DM that he would still give me, and only me, the combat XP for successfully stopping combat. So I built a bard that had some stupid high charisma and intelligence and put most of my points in diplomacy, disguise, linguistics, and performance. I spent 2 nights a week for almost 2 months figuring out ways to stop every single combat encounter I could by either convincing the enemies or my party to avoid the encounter entirely. At first it was hilarious. It almost became a competition between my party, my DM, and myself. By about the 3rd week, I was the only one that had managed to get any real XP, and my DM was just tossing free role-playing XP at the other players to try and keep them on par with me. I took it as a personal affront when my party mates managed to beat me to an encounter that resulted in violence, and we were all spending the entire session each time laughing. By the beginning of the 2nd month, we started the main quest line our DM had set out for us, and when we got to the first major encounter, I ruined it. Suddenly my pacifist bard wasn't very popular, and the joke kind of lost its shine. I had purposely ruined a good friend's hard work for a stupid joke. Luckily, he'd seen it coming and had a subplot ready, but I could tell he was upset. We ended up having an in-game intervention where they managed to convince my tune of the error of his ways. But I had built this tune for one task, and he was too good at it. I only used my bard's very specific set of skills rarely for the next month and tried to make myself useful to the group, but I wasn't really having any fun with the character any longer. So here's where the fun really started. I had a private chat with our wonderful DM, and we figured out an endgame for my tune. We decided to rekindle my tune's revulsion to violence and put it into overdrive. My DM started throwing nothing but goblins and humans at us. I not only convinced all of them to give up the fighting, but I also convinced all of them to follow us and live a pacifist lifestyle alongside me. What started as a party of 5 very quickly turned into a small traveling town of over 100 humanoids. We arrived at a major city with my followers, and started to set up camp right outside. The core party went inside the city to pick up the next piece of our quest, and my character spent the day helping my followers set up our camp. I had them arrange the camp into a pseudo-church with my tent as the altar. When my party came back, instead of the nice peaceful camp they were expecting, they walked in on a religious sermon, with my tune whipping up my army to a fervor, talking about how this city is filled with violence and murderers. I was channeling the worst type of televangelist through my tune. Why should we just be happy with our personal pacifism? We needed to sacrifice our values in order to purify the city. I told them to await my signal the next morning and start burning the city down. Force everyone to my followers' level in order to rebuild them back up to a peaceful society. I invited my party to dine with me on the eve of my most important day, and made it clear that they didn't have a choice. The DM and I played along. Whenever they would try to convince me that my plan was crazy, he would make sure the results were favorable for me. I made sure that my tune drank to abundance, repeating that tomorrow was going to be a glorious day. My party took their chance when my tune passed out drunk. They murdered my boy in cold blood. When my tune died, my DM described a great darkness exiting my body and swirling around the room. And when it dissipated, all around the tent were the sounds of fighting. All my followers woke up from the spell I had cast on them and started attacking each other. My DM made sure they had a great epic battle that made up for all their missed combat over the last month, and I rejoined the party as a classic dwarf cleric for the next session. TLDR, anti-war protester turns into violent televangelist and gets Caesared. There is great rejoicing. Our rogue accidentally flushed our paladin down the toilet. We were fighting a shambling mound in the basement/sewer under a castle on a high rocky crag along the cliffs. It had engulfed the paladin and was standing over a sewer grate. Our rogue was in another room and pulled a lever. The grate opened. Following several saving throws, the paladin and the mount fall and end up ejected out of the side of the crag, falling towards the beach far below, fighting each other on the way down. Hello, my crispy little jammy dodgers. Thank you for attuning the infinite grasp of your brilliant mind to this video until the very end. You are a warrior for the cause, and we appreciate you big time. Just a quick reminder, please join us on our subreddit, r/Mr. Ripper. That's where we are trying to direct the stories as best we can, but if you have a stupid or hilarious death to share with us, feel free to leave it here in the comments below as well. If you wanted to say hi to me at some point, feel free to check out our Discord server or my website, www.davemakesnoises.com. Links in the description, as is tradition. I hope to see you hanging out with us every Sunday as we kick it on live stream here on this channel and have a good laugh sharing some D&D stories from the community with everyone. That happens at 2 Pacific, 5 Eastern, 10 GMT, and if you're interested in seeing how we do D&D proper here at the channel, say no more. We have a weekly campaign inbound, and that will be live streamed as well. I am so excited to play some D&D with you all. Oh my god, I hope to make some stories happen that are uniquely ours to be cherished forever. That'll be Wednesdays at the time to which you are accustomed. Anyways, if you're new around here, please feel free to say hello in the comments. And if you're basically part of the furniture by this point, you already know it's time to welcome our new friends. That's all we got for announcements today. Thanks again for watching this video. Make sure you're practicing awareness, even if it's just for a few seconds, every single day. That is the most powerful tool we have to connect our conscious cosmic spark with the meat body that contains it. I love you so much, my sweet little poopers. Please sub for Nat 20s. We'll see you in a couple days.